My name is Dr. Thaddeus Caney, and I perform surgeries that would get me arrested in any normal hospital. But my clients aren't normal people. They're billionaires, oil barons, tech moguls, and foreign royalty. They pay me $10 million per procedure, and they never ask for anything ordinary. The money started 3 years ago when I lost my medical license. A malpractice suit destroyed my career, even though the patient lived. Regular hospitals wouldn't touch me, but Vivian Ashworth found me working at a free clinic in Detroit. She offered me more money than I'd ever seen to remove something from her husband's spine. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. Now I work exclusively for people whose names appear on Forbes lists and government watch lists. They call me when they need modifications that go beyond what any ethical surgeon would consider. The rules are simple. 5 of them, never changing. Rule 1. I don't ask questions about what I'm removing or installing. Rule 2. I work alone. No assistants, no nurses, no witnesses. Rule 3. Everything gets incinerated after each procedure. Rule 4. I never speak about my clients to anyone. Rule 5. Payment comes in untraceable cryptocurrency, transferred before I make the first cut. These rules have kept me alive and wealthy for 3 years. They've also shown me things that normal doctors never see. Take Cornelius Blackwood, for example. He owns half the lithium mines in South America and wanted me to replace his teeth with something else. Not dental implants or crowns. Something that moved on its own and required feeding twice daily with raw liver. The teeth had tiny chambers that needed to be cleaned with a specialized brush he provided. During the procedure, I watched the new teeth anchor themselves into his jawbone, with root systems that looked more like plant tendrils than dental roots. They pulsed with their own blood supply and made soft clicking sounds when they were hungry. He paid me $12 million for that operation and sent me a video 6 months later showing how the teeth could bite through steel cables. Or consider Duchess Evangeline Mortimer, who inherited her title, along with several pharmaceutical companies. She wanted me to install additional organs in her abdomen. Organs that weren't human and definitely weren't listed in any medical textbook. They pulsed with their own rhythm and secreted a clear fluid that she collected in small vials. The organs had to be kept at exactly 98.7 degrees and required hourly injections of a solution she provided in unmarked bottles. She called it her family recipe and laughed when she said it. The installation took 14 hours because each organ had to be connected to her nervous system with hair-thin wires that I threaded through her spine. Then there was Leopold Ashford, who runs the largest private prison system in the country. He wanted gills installed behind his ears, but not for breathing underwater. These gills filtered specific chemicals from the air around him. During our consultation, he explained that his business required him to spend time in environments with high concentrations of fear-based pheromones. The gills would let him absorb these chemicals directly into his bloodstream for what he called enhanced decision-making capabilities. The surgery required rebuilding part of his skull and connecting the gill systems to his carotid arteries. He paid $15 million and returned 6 months later asking for upgrades to process stronger concentrations. But today's client is different. Ambrose Fairfax made his fortune in private military contracts and offshore banking. He's sitting in my underground operating room, fully awake, explaining what he wants me to do. "Dr. Caney," he says, adjusting his silk tie, "I need you to give me a second stomach." I keep my expression neutral. "Where would you like it positioned?" "Right next to the first one, same size, same function. But this one needs to be connected to a different part of my digestive system." He pulls out a hand-drawn diagram. I've mapped out exactly where each tube should connect. The drawing shows anatomical details that shouldn't exist. Connections between organs that would kill a normal person. But Fairfax isn't normal. None of my clients are. "The new stomach will need special maintenance," he continues. "Once a week, I'll insert a feeding tube here." He points to a spot on his chest. "The stomach will need to process specific materials, things that would be toxic to my original digestive system." I study the diagram. The connections make a twisted kind of sense, like someone redesigned human anatomy for a completely different purpose. This will require significant modifications to your existing organs, I tell him. Your liver, pancreas, and intestines will all need adjustments. I understand the risks. Fairfax hands me a metal briefcase. 25 million. Half now, half when you're finished. $25 million. Enough to retire and disappear forever. But something about this request feels different from the others. Bigger, more permanent. Why do you need 2 stomachs? I ask, breaking rule 1. Fairfax smiles. His teeth are perfectly white and too sharp. Dr. Kane, you're paid to cut, not to question. But since you asked, I'll tell you this much. Some things can't be digested by normal human anatomy. Some things require specialized processing. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small glass jar. Inside, something green and translucent floats in clear liquid. It moves like it's alive, pressing against the glass with what might be tiny hands. This is what my new stomach will need to process, he says. 3 of these every week, forever. They're quite nutritious once they're properly broken down. I stare at the jar. The thing inside seems to notice me looking and presses harder against the glass. I can see tiny features on what might be a face. It looks almost human, but smaller. Much smaller. Where do these come from? I ask. That's not your concern, Fairfax says, putting the jar away. Your concern is installing the equipment that will let me digest them properly. He lies down on the operating table without being asked. I've already taken the anesthesia blocker. I'll be awake for the entire procedure. I need to make sure you do everything correctly. I've never had a client stay conscious during major surgery, but Fairfax is paying me enough to buy a small country. I pull on my surgical gloves and begin preparing the instruments. One more thing, he says as I pick up the scalpel. After you install the second stomach, you'll need to test it. I brought 3 specimens for the initial feeding. He gestures toward a cooler in the corner of the room. I hadn't noticed it before. Steam rises from the edges where the lid doesn't quite seal. What's in there? I ask. Fresh samples, still alive. The new stomach won't work properly unless its first meal is completely fresh. My hand stops moving. In 3 years of doing this work, I've never asked what my modifications were for. I've installed tracking devices in people's skulls, replaced hearts with mechanical pumps that run on blood instead of electricity, and grafted animal parts onto human bodies. But I've never been asked to feed something. I don't understand, I say. Fairfax sits up on the table. Dr. Caney, you're going to cut open my abdomen, install a secondary digestive system, and then help me test it by feeding it live specimens. You're going to do this because I'm paying you $25 million, and because you've already accepted the first half of the payment. He's right. The money is already in my account. $12.5 million that I've already mentally spent on a house in Switzerland and a new identity. What kind of specimens? I ask. The kind that fit in jars, he says, lying back down. The kind that are still breathing when they go in. I look at the cooler again. Something inside is making scratching sounds against the metal. Tiny sounds like fingernails on a chalkboard. Begin the procedure, Fairfax says. We have work to do. I make the first cut across his abdomen. He doesn't flinch. Blood flows in neat lines as I open his body cavity, exposing organs that pulse with steady rhythm. His liver is larger than normal and has an extra lobe that doesn't belong in human anatomy. His kidneys are connected to additional tubes that lead nowhere I recognize. Previous modifications? I ask. Several, he says calmly. Dr. Reginald Ashby did excellent work before his unfortunate accident. You're continuing his research. I've heard of Ashby. He was a brilliant surgeon who disappeared 2 years ago. The police found his operating room covered in blood, but never found his body. What happened to Dr. Ashby? I ask. He asked too many questions, Fairfax says. He also got curious about things that weren't his business. I hope you're smarter than he was. I continue cutting, exposing more of his internal anatomy. Everything looks functional but altered, like someone has been redesigning him piece by piece over many years. His heart has an additional chamber that pumps a thick golden fluid through secondary arteries. His lungs have extra air sacs connected to his throat through tubes I don't recognize. How long have you been getting these modifications? I ask. Since I was 25, he says. 40 years of improvements. You're giving me the final upgrade. As I work deeper into his abdomen, I notice that his intestines are lined with tiny sensors that glow faintly in the surgical lights. They're monitoring something, sending information to a small device embedded near his spine. What are these sensors for? I ask. Quality control, he says. They analyze everything I consume and report the nutritional content to my monitoring system. Some foods provide basic sustenance, others provide much more. The scratching sounds from the cooler are getting louder. Whatever's inside is becoming more active, as if it can sense what's happening. Dr. Caney, Fairfax says, I can tell you're thinking too much. Let me make this simple. You can complete this surgery, take your money, and never see me again. Or you can keep asking questions and end up like Dr. Ashby. I look at his open abdomen. His organs are clearly visible, vulnerable. One wrong cut and he'd die in minutes. But something tells me that killing Fairfax wouldn't be as easy as it looks. His body has been modified so extensively that normal human weaknesses might not apply anymore. I'll complete the surgery, I say. Good. Now let's discuss the installation process. The new stomach needs to be grown from my existing tissue. You'll need to harvest cells from my current stomach and culture them in the growth medium I provided. He points to a small machine in the corner that I hadn't noticed before. It looks like a cross between an incubator and a 3D printer, with tubes and wires connecting to tanks of bubbling liquid. How long does the growing process take? I ask. 6 hours, he says. We'll be here all night. I hope you didn't have other plans. I begin harvesting cells from his stomach lining. The tissue comes away easily, like it's been prepared for this procedure. I place the samples in the growth medium and start the machine. It hums quietly as it begins building a new organ from scratch. While we wait, Fairfax says, let me tell you about the feeding schedule. Every Tuesday, I'll need 3 specimens. They have to be fresh, preferably still conscious. The stomach won't process them properly if they're already dead. Where do you get these specimens? I ask. I have suppliers, he says. People who understand the value of discretion. People who provide rare commodities to discerning customers. The machine beeps softly. A screen shows the new stomach taking shape, growing from a small cluster of cells into a fully formed organ. It's beautiful, isn't it? Fairfax says, watching the screen. Human tissue but improved, designed for a specific purpose. What purpose exactly? I ask. Processing life essence, he says simply. Converting living consciousness into usable energy. The specimens provide both nutrition and power for my other modifications. I stare at him. You're talking about eating living things. I'm talking about survival, he says. Dr. Caney, there are people in this world who require more than normal food to sustain themselves. People whose modifications demand specialized fuel. The machine beeps again. The new stomach is nearly complete, pink and healthy looking. It pulses with its own rhythm, ready for installation. It's time for the next phase, Fairfax says. Connect the new organ to my existing digestive system, exactly as shown in the diagram. I begin the delicate work of connecting blood vessels and digestive tubes. Each connection must be perfect, or the entire system will fail. Fairfax watches me work, offering occasional guidance. Dr. Caney, he says as I connect the final tube, you're very skilled. I understand why Vivian Ashworth recommended you. You know Vivian? I ask. We're old friends, he says. We share similar dietary requirements. The image of Vivian comes back to me. The small bones I found in her husband's spine during that first surgery. Bones that looked almost human, but were too small to be from an adult. "Dr. Kane," Fairfax says, "it's time for the feeding test." I look at the cooler. The scratching sounds have stopped. "What's in there?" I ask. "Dinner," he says. I walk to the cooler on legs that feel like lead. My hands shake as I reach for the handle, but I force them steady. $25 million. That's what I keep telling myself. The lid opens with a soft hiss. Cold air flows out, carrying a smell like copper pennies and wet leaves. Inside, 3 glass containers sit in crushed ice. Each one holds something small and pale that moves in slow, fluid motions. "Take them out carefully," Fairfax says from the operating table. "They bruise easily." I lift the first container. The thing inside is about the size of my thumb, with delicate features and tiny arms that press against the glass. Its eyes are large and dark, too intelligent for something so small. It looks up at me with what I can only describe as pleading. "What are they?" I whisper. "A delicacy," Fairfax says. "Very rare, very expensive. My suppliers assure me these are fresh from this morning's harvest." I set the container on the instrument tray with trembling hands. The other 2 containers hold similar creatures, all alive, all watching me with those dark eyes. "Now comes the interesting part," Fairfax says. "Open the first container and drop the specimen directly into the feeding tube. The new stomach needs to process it while it's still conscious." I stare at the container. The tiny being inside has stopped moving, as if it knows what's coming. "I can't do this," I say. "Dr. Caney," Fairfax's voice becomes harder. "You've already taken my money. You've already performed the surgery. This is simply the final step. This is murder. This is feeding," he corrects. "These specimens were bred for this purpose. They exist to provide nutrition to people like me. People who require more than ordinary food to sustain our modifications." I look at his open abdomen. The new stomach pulses eagerly, connected to tubes that lead throughout his body. Other organs I don't recognize have started glowing with a soft blue light. "What are you?" I ask. "I'm the next step in human evolution," he says. "Dr. Kane, there are families in this world who have been improving themselves for generations. We've moved beyond the limitations of normal human biology. By eating these things, by consuming pure life energy," he says, "these specimens contain concentrated vitality. When my modified digestive system processes them, I absorb their life force directly." The creature in the first container has begun making tiny sounds, like a baby bird calling for its mother. "How long do you live?" I ask. "With all these modifications?" "Indefinitely," Fairfax says, "as long as I maintain the feeding schedule. My great-grandfather started this process in 1847. He's still alive, still feeding." I think about Vivian Ashworth, about the bones in her husband's spine, about Dr. Ashby's disappearance, about all the wealthy clients who pay millions for modifications that no normal person would want. "How many of you are there?" I ask. "Enough," he says. "We have our own communities, our own suppliers, our own doctors. You're not the only surgeon who performs these procedures, Dr. Kane. You're just the most recent. What happened to the others?" "Some retired with their fortunes intact. Others became too curious for their own good." His voice carries a clear warning. "The choice is yours." I pick up the first container again. The creature inside has curled into a ball, as if trying to hide. "Dr. Kane," Fairfax says, "I'm going to count to 10. If you haven't opened that container by the time I reach 10, you'll join Dr. Ashby in whatever afterlife awaits failed surgeons. 1. I twist the lid. It comes off easily. 2. The creature looks up at me with those dark, intelligent eyes. 3. My hands are shaking again. The tiny being makes a soft sound that might be a word in a language I don't understand. 4. I think about the money in my account, about my new life in Switzerland, about never having to see another one of these procedures. 5. The creature reaches up with tiny arms, as if asking to be lifted out gently. 6. I think about Dr. Ashby, about what might have happened to him when he refused to complete a procedure. 7. Fairfax's other organs are glowing brighter now. The new stomach pulses faster, eager for its first meal. 8. I tip the container toward the feeding tube. The creature slides toward the opening, scrabbling for purchase with tiny fingers. 9. It falls into the tube with a whisper-soft sound. 10. The feeding tube carries it down into the new stomach. I watch through the transparent walls as the creature lands in the organ's interior. The stomach immediately begins contracting, digestive acids flowing from specialized glands. The creature's tiny voice echoes up through the tube for several seconds before going silent. Fairfax's body begins to glow. Not just his organs, but his skin, his eyes, even his hair. Energy flows through him like electricity through copper wire. Magnificent, he breathes. Absolutely magnificent. The second specimen, please. I open the second container with steady hands now. The choice has been made. The line has been crossed. The creature inside this container is smaller than the first, with silver hair and eyes like stars. It doesn't struggle as I pour it into the feeding tube. The third specimen is the smallest yet, barely the size of my pinky nail. It makes musical sounds as it falls into Fairfax's new stomach. With each feeding, his glow grows brighter. His modified organs pulse with renewed energy. His skin becomes smoother, his muscles more defined. He's growing younger as I watch. "Perfect," he says, sitting up on the operating table. The surgical wounds in his abdomen begin closing on their own, healing without stitches or bandages. "Dr. Kane, you've exceeded my expectations." He stands and walks to a mirror on the wall. The man looking back appears to be in his 30s, though I know he's actually in his 60s. "The feeding was successful," he says, admiring his reflection. "The new stomach is functioning perfectly. I estimate this will extend my current cycle by another 50 years. "Your current cycle? The time between major modifications," he explains. "Every few decades we need upgrades to maintain our enhanced longevity. New organs, improved systems, better processing capabilities." He pulls on his shirt and straightens his tie. The man who was opened from chest to pelvis an hour ago now looks like he just stepped out of a boardroom. "Dr. Caney," he says, reaching into his jacket. "The remaining $12.5 million will be transferred to your account within the hour. You've earned every penny." "What happens now?" I ask. "Now you go home and forget this ever happened," he says. "You follow the rules, you keep your mouth shut, and you enjoy your retirement." "And if I don't?" "Then you become very familiar with the contents of those glass containers," he says pleasantly. "From the inside." He walks toward the door, then stops and turns back. "Dr. Kane, you might be interested to know that we're always looking for new suppliers. People who can provide fresh specimens on a regular basis. The work pays well, and the hours are flexible." "I'm not interested," I say quickly. "Of course not," he says. "But if you ever change your mind, Vivian Ashworth has my contact information." He leaves, and I'm alone in the operating room, with the empty containers and the smell of copper pennies. I clean up the equipment and incinerate everything, following Rule 3. The containers go into the fire along with my surgical gloves and the bloody gauze. Within an hour, there's no evidence that anything unusual happened here. My phone buzzes. The bank notification confirms the transfer. $12.5 million. Enough money to disappear forever and never think about glass containers or tiny voices again. But as I drive home through the empty streets, I can't stop thinking about Dr. Ashby. about what happened when he asked too many questions, about whether he's still alive somewhere, or if he became part of someone's feeding schedule. I think about Vivian Ashworth and her husband's modified spine, about Cornelius Blackwood's moving teeth, about Duchess Evangeline Mortimer's additional organs, about all the wealthy clients who pay millions for modifications that let them live forever by consuming other living beings. And I think about Fairfax's offer, about becoming a supplier instead of a surgeon, about finding more of those tiny creatures and selling them to people who need them to survive. The money is already in my account. The Swiss bank account is already open. The new passport is already printed. But I know I won't use any of it, because tomorrow morning I'm going to call the FBI and tell them everything I know about people who buy immortality with the lives of creatures too small to defend themselves. I'm going to break every rule I agreed to follow. And I'm going to find out exactly what happened to Dr. Reginald Ashby. The wealthy elite might live forever, but some things are more important than money. Some things are more important than survival. Some things are worth dying for, even if it means ending up in a glass container myself. I park outside my apartment and check my phone one more time. $25 million sits in my account, enough to buy safety and silence for the rest of my life. Instead, I delete the account information and dial the number for the FBI's tip line. "This is Dr. Thaddeus Kane," I say when someone answers. "I have information about a group of people who are committing murder to extend their lifespans. You're going to want to hear this." The agent on the other end sounds skeptical at first, but his tone changes when I mention names like Fairfax, Ashworth, and Blackwood. These are people the government has been watching for years. "Dr. Caney," he says, "can you come in tonight? We need to record your statement while the details are fresh." "I'll be there in an hour," I say. "But you should know that I'm probably going to die for this. These people have resources you can't imagine." "We'll provide protection," he says. "How many others are involved?" "I don't know," I admit. Fairfax mentioned communities, suppliers, other doctors. This could be bigger than just a few wealthy individuals. As I drive to the FBI field office, I notice a black sedan following me. It maintains exactly the same distance for miles, turning when I turn, stopping when I stop. When I pull into the FBI parking garage, the sedan drives past without slowing down. The interview takes 6 hours. I tell them everything, from my first surgery for Vivian Ashworth to tonight's procedure with Fairfax. I describe the modifications, the creatures, the feeding process, and the money. They record every word and ask for details I hadn't thought to remember. "Dr. Caney," Agent Rodriguez says during a break, "we've been investigating some of these individuals for years. Financial crimes, human trafficking, suspected murder, but we've never had anyone on the inside before." "What happens now?" I ask. "Now we build a case," she says. "We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. That could be months or even years from now." "I won't live that long," I say. "They'll find me." "We have safe houses," she says. "New identities. We can protect you." But I know better. People like Fairfax don't just disappear because the FBI tells them to. They have connections in every government agency, every police department, every courthouse in the country. When I finally leave the FBI building, dawn is breaking over the city. The same black sedan is waiting in the parking lot across the street. This time, it doesn't bother following me. The message is clear. We know where you are. I drive home slowly, checking my mirrors every few seconds. The sedan stays put, but I spot at least 3 other cars that might be following me. Or maybe I'm just paranoid after staying awake for 36 hours. Back in my apartment, I pack a single bag with essentials. The FBI said they'd contact me within 24 hours about witness protection, but I'm not going to wait around and hope they can protect me from people who eat living beings to stay immortal. As I'm packing, my phone rings. Unknown number. "Dr. Kane," a familiar voice says when I answer. It's Fairfax. I hear you've been talking to interesting people this morning. How did you— Dr. Caney, we have friends everywhere, including several who work for the federal government. Your conversation with Agent Rodriguez was quite informative. My blood turns to ice water. If they have people inside the FBI, then there's nowhere safe to run. What do you want? I ask. I want you to reconsider your recent decision, he says. The FBI can't protect you from us, but we can protect you from them. All you have to do is tell Agent Rodriguez that you made everything up. Stress-induced hallucinations brought on by sleep deprivation and guilt over your past malpractice cases. And if I don't, then you become very familiar with what it feels like to be processed by a specialized digestive system, he says pleasantly, from the inside. The phone goes dead. I stand in my apartment, holding my packed bag, knowing that every choice I make from this point forward could be my last. Outside my window, more black sedans are arriving, but I've already made my choice. Some things are worth dying for, even if it means ending up in a glass container myself. I call Agent Rodriguez back. This is Caney, I say. They know about our meeting. They have people inside your organization. Dr. Caney, where are you? She asks urgently. Home, I say. They're here. Send backup if you want to save the case, because I'm about to become evidence. Through my window, I watch men in expensive suits getting out of the sedans. They move with military purpose toward my building. Dr. Caney, Agent Rodriguez says, we're sending units to your location. Stay on the line. Tell the world what these people are doing, I say. Don't let them buy their way out of this. The men are in my building now. I can hear them coming up the stairs, not bothering to be quiet. They know I have nowhere to run. As I begin my story, I wonder if I'll live long enough to finish telling it. But for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm doing the right thing, even if it gets me killed. The footsteps stop outside my door.